Welcome back. Part 2 is here. All I have to say is, if you haven't listened to part 1, good stuff there. It'll make a lot more sense. Other than that, let's get into it.
What is the most common challenge to consistently communicate within an organization?
The most common challenge.
That you see anyway.
So what I'm getting caught up on, I think, is the word to say consistently communicate. I don't know if we need to consistently communicate if we communicate effectively the first time.
That's an interesting semantic breakdown, because I hear what both of you are saying.
Yeah, and this is a great example of the smallest areas where we assume what we're saying is consistently understood by the other person. So when I say consistently communicate, I mean consistently do it over time in an effective way. Oftentimes we have that one moment, Beth, we got to talk. And we just had a really, really good chat. And then the next time you and I talk, it didn't go as well. And so now, I don't know. And then we stop talking. Like we're no longer effectively communicating because we're not making the effort to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question, Keith? When you ask that question, are you thinking of an organization that isn't communicating well?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I think I'm going to answer your question, and if I don't, you let me know.
And that's great communication.
That's my example of what I think is not happening. A lot of times people think that just because I said it, I've communicated it. So why aren't they now doing that? So why aren't we now having progress? I booked that meeting with Keith. I told him. So why didn't his behavior or his performance change? Why didn't we hit that deadline? I told him. And so the piece that's missing there is Keith needs to tell me back. Keith needs to say in whatever language makes sense for Keith, hey, Beth, if I understood you correctly, we now need to hustle and get that deadline met for Tuesday instead of Friday because the client is demanding this or whatever the situation might be. Yes, Keith, you might be pulling an all-nighter on Monday. We have that confirmation. So what does that mean for me? Well, that means I'm not going to be able to get this and this done. So it's the clarifying part. It's the confirming that you heard what I intended.
I'm writing this down. What I heard you say, and actually part of what I heard you say is what you did when he asked the question. Clarification and confirmation, that would mean that the team or the individual or the organization would have to have some element of allowing questioning.
For sure.
And being okay with questioning.
And that's a skill too. That's a skill.
Oh, yeah.
And how do you do that in a safe way that says, so you're telling me I got to work late? Okay, hold on. If you're a visual person, I think about how do we leave the door open so that rather than close the door, like reduce the number of judgments. And how do we stay curious to say, oh, okay, so the client's moved up that deadline. If I'm hearing you correctly, this is what you need me to do. And us to be on the same page versus saying, did you just tell me what to do? Slam the door, right? Leave that door open so that we can get to a place where this exchange of information is going to move to something a little bit more productive that we both understand.
And taking it even a step further is what would limit you from doing it. How many times do you walk away? She asked me to stay late. She doesn't know that this, and this weekend, and she didn't even ask me. And now here I am, frustrated. And you walked away thinking, that conversation went really well. And then the next one doesn't happen.
I was just going to say, I've been in meetings where people, manager, team member and managers have said to me, I walked away thinking, oh, we had a great meeting. And then I'll have a separate conversation with the employee, and the employee says, they didn't understand me. They didn't listen to me. She just told me what to do. And I'm thinking, what? And two people with, great intent walked away with completely different stories of the same situation.
In that scenario, there's a dynamic between employee and manager. The thing we just talked about, questioning, may not be allowed. It's interesting.
One of the things that I encourage people to do, regardless of where you are in your stage of, let's call it, relationship with people at work, we talk about establishing communication protocols. And that can be really weird if you and I have been, working together forever, to all of a sudden stop and say, how am I doing in this? Think of the time and the energy and the money that we can save and be more productive if I just knew how you like to communicate. And that can be as simple as, do you like to text? Like, are we going to text? Are you going to pick up the phone? Like, who does that anymore? Are we picking up the phone? Yes. In office settings, they would send an email and then stand up and go to their colleague's desk and say, I just sent you that email. And you're thinking, and now you're here?
Yeah.
So think about this small little thing that we're talking about, how we send an email. My silence, or me trying to solve a problem for you, could be agitating. These are so many different facets of communication where I think I'm helping because you're manager, I'm giving you solutions, when really you just needed time to vent. So even, when I talk about communication protocols, even how we structure our team meetings and our one-to-one meetings. So if I'm a venter, I might say, we've got 30 minutes. For the first 5, manager, I'm going to vent. Like, you're going to zip it. I am going to vent, and I don't want you to solve anything. I just want you to look at me and keep nodding your head, or just stay engaged with your body language, which is another part of communication. And I'm just going to vent. And then we're going to go to, our status updates and are we on track and whatnot, and just setting up our protocols on how we're going to go through our meetings to give me what I need and you what you need from a communication standpoint. And hopefully that's all wrapped up in that nice little bow of clarifying and confirming that we're all on the same page, that I walk away from that 30 minutes together doing what I think we just talked about, and that you will do the same for me in exchange. So it's a contract in a way, right? What are the protocols of how we're going to communicate?
And
it's not easy. But a lot of people don't do it. It's not easy.
No.
There's so many facets to that, and we take so much for granted when it comes to communication. Help me just start what a check-in would sound like and look like.
So that leads to the question, what does a check-in look like?
So a check-in would be, first and foremost, I think the frequency of a check-in is really important. So a check-in isn't once a year on your annual performance review with your manager, or checking in at the beginning of a project or an end of a project. A check-in would be something that would be done quite regularly, but first setting up the expectations around the protocol. If you haven't established the protocols, and now you're like, Beth, I'm 17 years into this relationship, I haven't established the protocols, where do I start? That would be different. But if it's fresh and new, start with the protocols, and then on a weekly basis or every 2 weeks, there's your frequency to be able to check in specifically just on communication by saying, how am I doing? And so the other tip here is, I wouldn't wait for somebody to tell you that you're sucking at something. I would be the one to have the courage and the vulnerability to go to that person and say, how am I doing when it comes to my communication? A big open-ended question followed by a beautiful zip it and pause. And that person will probably look at you incredibly confused. And you might say, lately I've been emailing you probably twice a day. I just want to see if that's working out for you. Because the other option is, I could be drafting all of my communication and saving it till the end of the day and sending you one email at the end of the day. So let's just start first with the format that I'm using. Is email working? And how's the frequency of my email? I know that you love detail, but I'm realizing that my emails are getting longer and longer, and you're probably going to have to scroll through a lot of stuff. Is that working for you? Big open-ended question. Lots of silence after that. And then I also like to encourage people to say, what's one thing that I'm doing well, and what's one thing that I can improve? Because we all like hearing the good stuff. So what am I doing well from communication? But again, that courage and vulnerability to go to someone to say, tell me, like, I'm giving you permission to tell me the one thing that I can be doing differently. So if I'm working with someone that's maybe not as bold, not as confident, and they're like, oh, I just wish I could tell this person that their emails really suck or whatever it might be, you are now giving that person permission to tell you, we're not leaving this meeting until you tell me one thing I can do better. How can I improve this?
I have a question on the giving permission. I do this probably twice a year with my teams, and it's very infrequent to get a response other than you're doing a good job. If there's 10 people, maybe one person will say you could do better at this, and I'm like, that's what I'm looking for. My immediate thought is like, well, maybe I'm not asking for it right, or like, how can I change the approach?
What's happening there is people are probably afraid to hurt your feelings, or they're wondering, how honest can I actually be? So I would say there's two different things you can do. One thing you could do is be vulnerable and share some of the things you're working on first. So I know sometimes I'm really quick to respond and people are thinking that I don't have time for them, or so it's something that I'm working on to really be present in the moment. I would love for you to also then give me something that I need to work on. So the first tactic would be just by being vulnerable and sharing something that you're trying to work on. The other thing, and it depends on what the format is that you're asking for the feedback, but I often encourage people, especially if they're setting up team meetings or a protocol, again, an agenda of how they're going through things, for us both to have the opportunity to share. So I'm going to share some things with you and you're going to share some things with me. So knowing that it's going to go both ways can sometimes soften the blow. And then putting a number to it. I'm going to give you 2 things that you're doing well, and I'm also going to give you 2 things to make us better or improve our communication. If you say, tell me 1 thing or tell me 2 things, then as adults, we're more likely to respond to that. We like being told, specifically from a learning perspective at least, I need 1 thing. So I wouldn't do 5, I would do 1 thing and say 1 thing that is working, because we want it balanced as well. And then 1 thing I can do better. So I also want you to notice the language that I'm using. It's 1 thing that I can do better. It's not 1 thing you don't like, because I can't tell Ronnie what I don't like because he's my manager. What's 1 thing that can make us better? What's 1 thing that will improve our team meetings? What's 1 thing that will improve our email exchange? So making it a little bit more collaborative that way, and changing the language might be another tactic. Do you think one of those would work?
I love that.
You've left a lot of great tips throughout this conversation, but if there was one that you wanted people to take away, what would that be to more effectively building connection through communication?
I think it's the recognition that we're all so different, and oftentimes we try and communicate with the tone and the style that we're most comfortable with. And so we feel back to that, well, I said it, so it should work. It's the golden rule and the platinum rule. So a lot of us grew up with the golden rule of treat others as you want to be treated. But the platinum rule is treat others as they want to be treated. And when you can tap into how somebody else needs to receive that communication, whether they need time to digest, whether they need a warning before they get that tap of, hey, do you have a minute? There's something I need to talk to you about. Whether how you approach them, how you sandwich the conversation or not sandwich it, understanding how that person likes to communicate, the protocols around that, and then getting out of your own comfort zone to try and improve the communication by communicating with them the way that they need it, not necessarily the way that you're most comfortable.
Love it.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Now, where can people find you?
Right now, LinkedIn. That's it.
LinkedIn.
When I started my business, my husband said to me, I said, I need a website. He said, you need a client, girl. You don't need a website.
You have an amazing practice, and you have some great stuff to say. So people need to be able to find you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this time. Let's do it again.
Yeah. Thanks, Beth.
Absolutely.